I wasn't supposed to take that road, and I know that sounds like the beginning of every dumb decision ever made. But hear me out, because this wasn't just a wrong turn. This was the kind of mistake that feels small when you make it and cosmic when you look back at it. Like the universe just leaned forward and whispered, "Bet." And 2 winters ago, I was driving alone toward Alaska, chasing nothing heroic, just a seasonal construction job. And the idea of starting over somewhere so cold it could freeze regret out of your bones. And the highway had been empty for hours, just my truck humming, snow blowing sideways like static across the windshield, pine trees packed tight on both sides like a jury that already decided I was guilty of something, and somewhere close to the border my GPS flickered, not in a normal glitchy way, but like it zoomed out too far and forgot where I was, the road ahead thinning into a gray nothing, and I laughed at first because tech fails all the time out there. But then the blue route line just stopped existing even though I was still rolling forward at 60, and about a mile later I saw a wooden sign half buried in snow that looked handmade, rough edges, letters carved deep and uneven, and it said, "Welcome to Alaska, 12 miles, which made no sense because I wasn't there yet. I knew I wasn't there yet, and beneath it someone had carved, "Keep driving, do not stop," no state logo, no reflectors, just that warning like it wasn't for tourists but for prey. And I remember feeling that little shift in my stomach. Like when you realize you've been home alone longer than you thought, and the house sounds different. But my gas light had just blinked on and the main highway was miles behind me. So when I noticed a narrow side road splitting off to the right, not even paved, just compact snow and dirt, I told myself maybe it was a shortcut, maybe construction rerouted traffic, maybe I missed a memo, and I turned. And the second my tires crossed onto that road, the radio cut to static, and the heater seemed weaker even though the dial hadn't moved. And I swear the air inside the truck felt colder, not dramatic movie cold. Just enough that I could see my breath if I leaned close to the windshield. And I checked the clock on the dashboard, and it said 11:43 p.m. And 10 minutes later, it still said 11:43 p.m. And I tapped it thinking maybe it froze. But my phone said the same thing. 11:43, battery draining faster than it should, dropping a percent every few seconds like something was pulling from it. And I told myself I was just tired, that long drives mess with your head, that isolation stretches time. But then I noticed the trees had changed, and I don't mean they became different species. I mean they didn't look right. Their trunks bent slightly toward the road as if caught mid-lean, branches angling downward in unnatural symmetry, like ribs around a throat. And every few seconds I had this weird feeling like I'd passed the same cluster of trees already. Like the road was looping without turning. And that's when I saw hazard lights blinking ahead, orange pulses cutting through the snow. And relief hit me first because another vehicle meant civilization. But as I got closer, I realized the SUV was parked sideways across part of the road, engine off, windows fogged from the inside, and no footprints anywhere around it, not even leading from the driver's door into the trees. Just smooth snow like it had been placed there by careful hands. And I remember the sign saying "Do not stop," and I argued with myself for a solid 30 seconds because leaving someone stranded in that cold would basically be a death sentence. So I slowed, rolled my window down, and yelled out asking if anyone needed help, and nothing answered, no movement, just the rhythmic blink of those hazards. And I sat there listening to my engine idle, the only living sound in miles. And then the back passenger door of the SUV slowly creaked open, not fast, not slammed, just eased outward like someone invisible was stepping out politely. But no one stepped out, nothing moved, and my chest tightened in that instinctive animal way, like prey sensing a shadow overhead. And I should have floored it, I know that, but instead I killed my engine and stepped out into the snow, because logic still had a voice back then, and the cold hit hard, sharpened before, biting straight through my jacket. And I walked toward the SUV, calling out again, and the inside light flickered weakly. And when I reached the open door, I saw the seats soaked in something dark and glossy, not red, not quite oil, thicker than water, pooling in the seams. And there were no keys in the ignition, no personal items, no signs of struggle, just that wet darkness and the faint smell of metal. And behind me, my truck engine suddenly shut off even though I'd left it running before stepping away, plunging the road into near darkness, except for the SUV's blinking hazards. And then my truck's radio blasted to life at full volume. Pure static at first, and then underneath it a whisper, so low I thought it was wind until it formed words. Keep driving, and I spun around and my headlights flickered back on but dimmer, like they were struggling. And when I turned back to the SUV, the door that had been open was now closed, the hazards off, the entire vehicle just gone like it had been erased in the snow without leaving tire tracks. And my stomach dropped in a way I can't even describe because I know what I saw. I know I didn't hallucinate an entire SUV. And that's when I noticed something across the road between the trees, tall and narrow, too tall, proportions wrong like someone stretched a person in editing software, its arms hanging almost to its knees, its neck bent at an angle that would have snapped bone, and where its face should have been it was only a pale blur like frost over glass. And it didn't step forward. It leaned, and as it leaned, the trees around it leaned too, branches creaking softly in unison, and I couldn't move, not because I was frozen by fear, but because it felt like gravity shifted slightly toward it, like my body was being encouraged in that direction. And then my phone buzzed in my pocket even though I had no service. And when I pulled it out, the screen was open, a camera app by itself, pointing at the road behind me. And on the screen, I could see my own back standing there in the snow, except I wasn't holding a phone in that image. I was just standing still. And behind that version of me, something else stood closer than the thing in the trees, something that looked almost human, except its head twitched side to side too fast, like frames, skipping. And I dropped the phone, and when I looked up, the tall shape across the road was gone, and my truck engine roared back to life on its own, headlights bright again, and every instinct screamed to get inside and drive. So I did, tires spinning before catching grip, and I didn't look in the rearview mirror for at least a mile, because I knew if I saw anything running behind me, I'd lose whatever sanity I had left. And when I finally glanced back, the road was empty, smooth snow, no footprints, no tire marks from the SUV, nothing. And my dashboard clock now read 2:17 a.m., meaning almost 3 hours had passed that I couldn't account for. And my gas tank was nearly empty even though I'd had at least half a tank before turning. And I tried telling myself I'd fallen asleep at the wheel for a minute, that I'd dreamed the SUV, but that doesn't explain the missing fuel or the time jump or the whisper on the radio. And as I drove, the forest seemed denser, the darkness thicker, like ink poured into the air. And I started noticing shapes just outside the beam of my headlights, not fully visible, just hints of vertical movement matching my speed, pacing me between the trees. And every so often the radio would crackle and cut out for half a second like someone tapping a microphone. And I kept driving because the sign said do not stop, and now I understood that wasn't advice. It was survival. And about 15 minutes later, I saw another sign ahead, larger, reflective, official, looking this time. And relief flooded me because it meant I was back on some recognized route. And it read welcome to Alaska in clean white letters. And I almost laughed at how dramatic my brain had been making everything. But as I passed, I saw deep scratches carved into the metal underneath the printed words. Scratches that weren't there by accident but deliberate, spelling out you stopped. And my throat went dry because I had stopped. I'd stepped out. I'd broken whatever rule governed that road, and immediately after passing that sign, my headlights flickered again, and for a split second the road ahead wasn't a road but a long corridor lined with those bent trees arching overhead like ribs. And in that half second I saw figures standing between them, dozens of them, all tall and narrow and wrong, all angled toward the road, as if waiting their turn. And then the image snapped back to normal highway, snow and asphalt and nothing else. And I told myself I was just tired, that isolation plus fear equals hallucinations. But then my phone buzzed again, and this time there was a single text message from an unknown number with no signal bars showing, and it read 11:43 p.m., and I felt something inside me sink because at the time when the GPS glitched, when I first saw the sign, and as I drove farther, the snow on the road began to look less disturbed, less like a commonly traveled path, and more like untouched ground. And I realized with creeping dread that I hadn't seen a single other vehicle since turning off the main highway, not even oncoming headlights in the distance. And my gas gauge dropped to E, and I knew I couldn't keep driving much longer, but stopping felt like surrender, and the forest on either side seemed closer now, trees leaning just slightly more inward than before, like the corridor was narrowing, and in my side mirror, I thought I saw something briefly keeping pace again. Not running, but gliding, tall silhouette matching my speed effortlessly, and when I blinked it was gone, and the radio whispered again through static, not words this time, but something that almost sounded like breathing, synchronized with mine, and that's when I understood in the most bone-deep way possible that whatever was on that road wasn't random. It wasn't haunting the forest. It was watching the road specifically, watching travelers, measuring them, testing them, and I had failed the first test by stopping, and as the truck sputtered with low fuel, I saw faint lights ahead that looked like a small town, warm yellow glows against the dark, and hope flared because town meant gas, people, witnesses. But as I got closer, I realized the lights weren't moving like real lights. They flickered in identical rhythm, like copies pasted into night, and the buildings had no visible detail beyond silhouettes, flat fronts like cardboard cutouts. And there were no cars parked anywhere, no smoke from chimneys, no movement behind windows, just rows of structures placed too neatly along a road that didn't exist on any map I'd seen. And my truck finally coughed and died right at the edge of that town, engine cutting out with a final shudder. And the silence that followed was heavier than any silence I'd known. And in that stillness, I heard footsteps crunching in snow behind my truck, even though I hadn't opened the door yet, slow, deliberate. And when I looked in the rear-view mirror, I saw someone standing, directly behind my vehicle in the center of the road, human height this time, bundled in a parka with their hood up, face shadowed, and relief washed over me so hard it almost made me dizzy, because human meant help, human meant explanation, and the figure raised one gloved hand and waved slowly, and I opened my door to call out, and the cold hit again but sharper, almost electric. And as I stepped down into the snow, I realized something that made my blood turn to ice. There was only one set of footprints in the snow leading toward my truck, and they weren't coming from the town ahead. They were coming from the dark forest behind me, and they matched my boot pattern exactly. The craziest part wasn't seeing that figure behind my truck. It was realizing the footprints in the snow were mine. Exact same tread, same worn-down edge on the right heel, same slight outward angle from an old ankle injury I got in high school, and they didn't lead from the town ahead like you'd expect. They came out of the forest behind me, straight from the tree line, straight up to my bumper, stopping exactly where that hooded figure stood, waving like we were old friends meeting at a gas station instead of in the middle of nowhere on the way to Alaska. And I remember thinking maybe I walked in a circle earlier. Maybe during those missing 3 hours I'd wandered around and came back. Maybe I was losing it. But that didn't explain how I was standing here now while another version of me had apparently already walked that exact path. And the figure tilted its head slightly, just a small movement, but too precise, like it was studying how I moved so it could mirror better. And in a voice that sounded like mine but played through a cheap speaker, it said, "You okay, man?" And my stomach dropped because it wasn't copying my words. It was copying my tone, my cadence, like it'd been listening to me talk to myself in the truck for hours. And I didn't answer. I just stood there, breath foggy in front of me, tried to decide whether this was hypothermia messing with my brain or something way worse. And the town ahead flickered again in perfect sync, every window pulsing, dim then bright like a heartbeat, and the figure took one step closer, and I heard the crunch of snow. But when I looked down, its boots weren't pressing the ground at all, just hovering a hair above it while the sound played anyway, like a bad dub in a horror movie, and that's when it smiled. Except the hood was still shadowing its face, so I couldn't see lips or teeth, just the shape of the smile forming where a face should be. And it said, "You stopped?" The same words carved into the metal, signed earlier, and something in me snapped out of paralysis, and I backed toward the truck, fumbling for the door handle, heart slamming against my ribs, and the figure matched my movement perfectly, step for step, as if we were reflections in opposite mirrors. And suddenly the town lights ahead all went out at once, plunging everything into pitch black except a faint glow from my dashboard inside the cab. And in that darkness, I heard more footsteps, not just one set, but many, circling slowly, surrounding the road. And I realized the shapes I'd glimpsed between the trees earlier weren't gone. They'd just been pacing me, waiting for me to run out of gas. And the hooded figure spoke again, softer this time, almost gentle. "You were told to keep driving." And the radio inside my dead truck crackled to life again even though the engine was off. static filling the air before resolving into layered whispers repeating the same phrase over and over. Keep driving, keep driving, keep driving, like a broken record of regret. And I lunged into the driver's seat and slammed the door, locking it, out of pure instinct, even though some part of me knew locks meant nothing out here. And I twisted the key even though I knew the tank was empty. And to my shock, the engine turned over weakly, coughed like it had a single breath left, and the headlights flicked on, revealing that the town ahead wasn't buildings at all but tall wooden frames with flat painted fronts, like movie set facades propped up by beams, and behind them was nothing but forest, and standing between those fake storefronts were dozens of tall shapes, all slightly different heights but all wrong in the same way, heads tilted at impossible angles, arms too long, fingers brushing the snow without bending, and they were all facing me. And in the driver's side mirror, I saw the hooded figure now standing inches from my door, its head bent sideways, so far it should have snapped, and through the shadow of the hood, I could finally see something where its face should be. Not features, not eyes or mouth, just a smooth pale surface like frost on glass. And then that surface began to ripple slightly, as if something underneath was trying to push through and form a proper face, and it started mimicking mine in real time, eyes appearing where mine were, mouth shaping into the same tight line I had, except delayed by half a second like bad internet lag. And I don't know what possessed me, but I slammed the horn, a long, desperate blast that shattered the silence, and every single tall shape in front of the fake town jerked simultaneously toward the sound, movements snapping like puppets yanked by strings, and the hooded figure outside my door twitched violently for a split second before going completely still. And in that stillness, I realized something terrifying. They weren't trying to scare me. They were trying to sync with me, to match me perfectly. And maybe if they matched me well enough, I wouldn't be needed anymore. And the engine sputtered again and died, plunging the headlights into darkness. And immediately the fake town lights flickered back on, and the tall shapes were closer now, not rushing, not running, just slightly nearer than before, as if distance meant nothing to them. And my phone buzzed again with no signal, and this time the screen displayed a live front-facing camera view of me sitting in the truck. Except in the image, my head was tilted slightly sideways at an angle I hadn't moved to, and slowly, without realizing it at first, I felt my own neck beginning to lean in that same direction, muscles tightening painfully as if guided by invisible hands, and I forced myself upright, gasping, and the image on the phone glitched violently before going black, and outside the driver's window the hooded figure raised one hand and pressed it flat against the glass, and its handprint didn't leave condensation. It left a dark smear like that oil-thick substance from the SUV seats earlier, and I remembered the SUV, the missing vehicle that had vanished without tracks, and a horrible thought formed. Maybe the SUV hadn't vanished. Maybe it had been replaced, swapped out once its driver was fully copied, and I realized I hadn't seen any bodies in that vehicle, just residue, like something left behind after extraction, and panic surged through me, because if that was true, then this wasn't random. This road was a filter, a place where travelers were intercepted and studied and replicated, and the sign saying "do not stop" wasn't about safety. It was about minimizing exposure time, and I'd stepped out. I'd let it observe me up close, hear my voice clearly, watch how I moved, and now the hooded figure's face finished forming into mine perfectly. Same scar above the eyebrow, same slight crookedness in the nose, and it mouthed words silently at first before sound caught up, and it said in my exact voice, "You can rest now." And something inside the truck shifted behind me in the back seat, a subtle weight pressing into the cushion, and my blood ran cold because I was alone in this vehicle. I knew I was, but the rear view mirror now showed a silhouette sitting directly behind me, head tilted sideways in that wrong angle, and I didn't turn around because I was terrified that if I acknowledged it fully it would solidify, and instead I grabbed the ignition again out of pure desperation, whispering to myself that engines sometimes have fumes left. Sometimes miracles happen, and I turned the key and the engine roared back to life stronger than before, fuel gauge suddenly jumping from empty to a quarter tank as if refilled by something unseen, and the hooded copy outside stepped back in unison with me hitting the gas. And I didn't question it. I just floored it, tires spinning before gripping, and I drove straight through the fake town facades, with splintering as my truck smashed through, painted storefronts that felt lighter than cardboard. And as I burst through the forest beyond, I saw the tall shapes scatter sideways without bending their legs, gliding between trees. And for a moment, I thought I'd escaped, that maybe speed was enough. But then the road ahead split into 3 identical paths, all curving gently out of sight, and I realized I had no idea which one was real, and the GPS screen lit up again on its own, showing 3 blue route lines stacked on top of each other, like overlapping possibilities, and a new message appeared across the display. Select version. And my hands trembled on the wheel because I didn't understand what that meant. And in the rear view mirror, I saw not one silhouette in the back seat, but 2 now, both shaped like me, both sitting perfectly still, and the radio static shifted into a low hum that almost sounded like laughter layered under wind, and the hooded copy was no longer visible outside, which somehow felt worse, and I had to choose a path because stopping wasn't an option. So I picked the middle road and slammed the gas, and as I drove, the trees on either side seemed less bent, more normal, almost reassuring. And for a few minutes nothing happened, no flickers, no whispers, just the sound of my engine and tires on snow. And I almost convinced myself I'd broken through whatever that place was, until I glanced down at my dashboard clock and saw 11:43 p.m. glowing back at me again, like the night had reset, and my phone buzzed with another no-signal notification. This time a single photo attached, and when I opened it, my breath left my body because it was a picture of my truck driving down this exact road from above, as if taken by something hovering high in the trees, and in the driver's seat, I could clearly see myself gripping the wheel, but in the back seat behind that version of me, there were no silhouettes, just empty darkness, and the timestamp on the photo read, 3 hours from now. The timestamp on the photo said 3 hours from now. And I swear my heart stopped because in that picture I was still driving down the same snow-choked road, hands gripping the wheel, except the back seat behind that future version of me was completely empty, no silhouettes, no shadows, nothing, which meant either I was going to survive this or the version of me currently breathing wasn't the original anymore. And before I could even process that, my radio clicked on by itself and my own voice whispered, "You stopped?" Soft and calm, like it was reminding me of something I'd agreed to, and the trees outside straightened all at once like soldiers called attention, the road narrowing ahead into a tight corridor of black pines. And then I saw him, me, standing dead center in the headlights, wearing my jacket, my hat, my face almost perfect, except the eyes were too focused, too aware, like I was being studied by something trying to pass an exam on humanity. And when the truck died again, and silence swallowed everything, that copy knocked once on my window, polite as a neighbor, mouthing the word switch, while my GPS lit up with 3 options, return, replace, continue, and the layered whispers in the radio breathed, select version, over and over until my skin felt too tight for my bones. And I don't know if it was instinct or pure stubborn fear, but I slammed my hand on continue, and the engine roared back to life like it had never run out of gas, headlights blasting white as. The copy outside glitched mid-smile, its face rippling like frost cracking on glass. And for one impossible second, I saw dozens of other versions of myself standing between the trees at different angles. Some smiling, some broken, all watching to see which one I'd choose to be. And then everything snapped to black, and I woke up in daylight parked on a clean highway shoulder, beneath a normal green "Welcome to Alaska" sign. Gas tank half full, radio silent. Phone back to normal, no fake towns, no tall shapes, no footprints but mine, except when I checked my reflection in the rear view mirror. There was the faintest delay before it copied me, like bad internet lag. And even now, sometimes when I catch myself in dark glass, my neck tries to tilt just slightly sideways on its own, and I have to straighten it manually because deep down I can't shake the feeling that something out there didn't lose me that night. It just let me continue, and if you like the story, then hit the subscribe and press bell icon for more like this.